Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Kobe Rex. I'm a mortgage lender here in Colorado, licensed in all 50 states. I specialize in difficult cases such as divorce, self-employed, and very complex situations. And so, what we like doing is once every 2 weeks, doing a training on either different topics that are coming up. And what we're going to be spending a little bit of time today talking about is diving deeper into some divorce situations. In the past 2 months, we've been doing some more general trainings that have been going into specific things to look for, more like if we were a doctor, symptoms that we should be expecting in a divorce situation. Whereas today, using the doctor analogy, we're basically going to talk a lot more about the cure today. We're going to talk about when your client comes to us, what are we going to do in order to provide, get the equity out and not get stuck with what normally happens? How are we going to do that and still preserve great interest rates? And then finally, if you have one of your clients is in a position where they don't have a lot of equity coming out of a divorce settlement, how do we still get them into a house? So Tammy is my training manager, and she's going to be doing most of the driving for today's presentation. I'm going to be color commentary. So let me share my screen. Tammy, can you see that?
Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
works great.
Well, let's get into it.
Okay, so what we have for today, as Kobe said, we're going to highlight three tools that he has available to him to help folks get into a post-divorce situation, housing, figure that out, hopefully less traumatic, all those good kind of things as we go through. Go ahead and go. So these are the three options. And we look at any of these situations that come through as risk mitigation. You know, there's a lot of risks associated with any housing deal, any client you deal with, whether it's divorce or other situations, could be self-employed. Kobe also works on those types of situations. But in today's thing, we're going to focus on these three uh, options that maybe don't come up as often in a mortgage situation, but we're going to address these and some examples and why you might use them, the benefits of them. And also, you know, there are some risks to doing these. So it's not like it's a slam dunk, you know, obviously we're going to go for one of these options, but there are reasons to have these in the lineup just in case.
Did you say a Zen?
Hey, what?
Did you say a Zen in the lineup?
No, to have these in the lineup for your
Oh,
mortgage solutions.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
What
Thank
we
you.
have, yeah, what we have done before, these are three focus sessions we've done before, just as a real quick overview, and tools that we came out of and provided. So Kobe has those available after this session if you'd like access to these tools. Um, they're just real quick, some of them questionnaires, some of them just checklists. And this kind of outlines some of the things that we did go into depth with in previous sessions. So, like he says, specializes in um, cases that are just not your straightforward check the boxes and we're done. He has a lot of solutions and has a, as he says, licensed in all 50 states. So he could do a lot that maybe other lenders can't or don't do. He kind of specializes in those.
So I want to
So,
just provide context real quick on these three.
yep,
Like I'm
go
going to go
ahead.
through real quick. So the first one, we've seen issues with people that are drafting decrees with timelines that are completely not reasonable. So we've really focused on that first session. And I have recordings of all these, so you can always reach out to me afterwards. So that was what we did in that first one. In the second one, what we really focused on was a lot of times when people get divorced, there's like timelines, either like 90 days or 2 years, where you actually have to refinance someone off of something. And what I keep running into is that, like, even though the responsibility for one of the assets, like a car, is supposed to be off one person's part of their credit. Unfortunately, a lot of times I have issues where I have to be creative because the credit reports are still showing payments. And there's some specific issues that I went into in that presentation to help mitigate that. And then finally was, the last one was we had some issues where even when we were doing a pre-approval on a file, it looked like everything was going to be clear. It was actually even a self-employed file as well, but he had improperly taken care of a credit card in the initial divorce decree. And all of a sudden, when we did a judgment search with title, the deal was in Florida, and we actually found out on a previous marriage in Tennessee that there was a $12,000 outstanding judgment for one of his credit cards that we didn't catch until you go through underwriting. So all those little things that we've talked about in previous presentations, we're not trying to just, I know for many of us, this is still the first time getting to see you. So it kind of feels, I feel like for me in most situations with lending, it's not about just providing solutions up front and just kind of saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. So I'd love if you wanted to see any of the other past presentations, I'd love to provide those to you. And that is like the high level overview. So that way we can kind of, these are three big issues we saw. And now Tammy's going to pivot into more of what we're talking about today, which is how do we fix what's on the decree? How do we actually do what's on the decree and create peace post divorce situation?
Yeah. And overall, our goal with all of this is to avoid costly delays, avoid a contract not being able to be fulfilled. You know, we all spend a lot of time and energy when you have clients that are wanting to get new homes or sell a home or whatever they're trying to do in their situation. And, you know, none of us wants a thing to fall through. You know, we want it after all that time and energy, we want it to go through. We want to make sure that everybody is solid and that they're set by the time they're done. So in this particular situation with divorce lending, the sooner that Kobe can review and work with people on what they've got and look at, if at all possible, in some cases, we can look at a draft decree and go, oh, crud, please make that more clear. Or there's recommendations often that can be given earlier before it's even signed that just make going through a little bit better, a little bit more clear for everybody. Go ahead and go to the next. There we go. So moving on from, you know, what we have done and the things that we have been sharing up to this point, the first item for today's thing is the cash out refinance. You know, this allows one spouse to buy out the other and to get them off the mortgage. When they are required to do that, you want to be able to do this in a timely fashion and not let it, even if the decree says you've got 2 years or you've got 12 months or whatever it says, the sooner the better, because you just don't know what may be left hanging out there if they didn't list a credit card because they forgot about it, or just all kinds of things can occur. So the sooner that you can act on something, the better. And like I said before in introducing this, and Kobe's going to speak to some particulars here, you know, not everybody, this wouldn't be a good solution for everyone. However, when the fit is there and the reason to do it is there, having this option available, you know, could be the difference between completing the deal and not completing the deal and getting someone to be able to stay in a home versus not being able to stay there. So go ahead, Kobe.
Awesome. Yeah. So basically for most cash out refinances, if you think about them, traditional lenders limit it to 80%. And in a lot of these situations, if they've bought the house within the last 3 years, they're going to run into a challenge to get enough equity in order to satisfy dividing of assets during a divorce. So the nice thing is there are different providers that actually allow us to go up to a 90% refinance. And typically it's kind of, we have to do this in a two-part. The interest rate in this specific first part is a little bit higher, but about 4 months after doing the first cash out refinance, that's moved into a normal just rate and term refinance, which is representative of a much lower interest rate than most people are used to seeing. Biggest benefits of this is that it does separate And not just removes from the mortgage, but it clearly removes them easily from title as well. So there are other options that we're going to show later that you're not going to remove the trailing spouse or the divorced spouse from the mortgage, which sometimes they want to be completely removed, and it creates some difficulties with being able to prove that the mortgage is being paid by the other spouse for debt to income ratios. So for the cleanest split, a cash out refinance is best situation. There is another option that allows for you to get even more equity out. So this is capped at 90%. So we're going to go talk about our next option, which is even allows a little bit more access to equity as well.
So most of us have heard of a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. This one does provide, cash. You could use it, some of the benefits, you can use it. You don't have to spend the whole amount at once. The cash can be used for a number of different things. Again, maybe a reasonable option, but the risk of this one is it does not remove them from title or the first mortgage. It provides equity, but there's this other step. So you have to be sure, and this is something that having someone really focused on why you're doing this solution and, keeping track of that item for, the parties involved is there could be a reason to do this. Maybe it's the quickest way to get cash to somebody so they can qualify for something else coming up. But Kobe can speak a little bit more to this. But again, it is an option if the conditions are relevant to this being the best one to do.
Perfect. Okay, so basically the way that we do these presentations is I try to keep it underneath 20 minutes. So I'm going to say, I see your hand, Michelle. So I'm going to address that question as soon as we get done with the next slide.
Okay.
I just try to save time for recording.
Yep.
So with this one specifically, there was one thing that was mentioned about a minute ago. So all of these lending products are separate from removing someone from title. So I just wanted to just say what removes someone from title is a quit claim deed. So that is the number one thing that removes it. But what we're saying is that on the credit report, the way to using a HELOC, the first mortgage will still be showing on both spouses' credit report. So with the HELOC, the reason why I like the HELOC is because of the fact that I have providers that will allow you to pull loan to value. So 95% of your equity. So while we could do 90% at the cash out amount, this allows us to go up to 95%. Of course, that's dependent upon credit score and a little bit of how your market's doing. But what I like about this one is instead of being a mortgage that has scheduled payments, the nice thing about a HELOC is most of them have a draw period that is only interest only. So basically it's nice. I don't know if anybody else has had just a normal line of credit, but you really only are responsible for paying off the interest. And during the initial time, during a divorce situation or the years afterwards, this really gives you a lot more flexibility because most times there's not any mandatory payments. Yes, there is what we call an amortization period. So eventually the line keeps getting smaller and smaller as it goes. But it really is a great option to quickly HELOCs. I close HELOCs typically in like as little as 11 days. These are pretty quick. It's a lot of times we can do what's called a desktop appraisal, so you don't even have to get an appraiser in there. So the only big risk is that you still keep the other spouse on the mortgage. And I would just definitely talk to me later if you have any questions about when you are in the divorce decree situation, we will have to be very specific when we're qualifying for the other spouse that no longer lives in that property to make sure that we're properly excluding it from their debt ratio. But if you're just trying to get to the equity and use that quit claim to make sure they're off title, this is a great way to access some equity without having to sell the house And this is my solution that I have that has the most amount of equity option. And now we're going to pivot a little bit because now we're not going to be talking as much about actually getting what already is in a home. We're going to talk about solving one of the challenges for people that are purchasing a home that are forced to do so because of what the divorce decree says.
So, and I know question-wise, we'll take them just as soon as we're done with this, then we're on to questions. So we wanted to get this in, and so jot it down, keep track, we'll get there. So down payment assistance programs. Again, like Kobe said, options, there's reason to do it. There's reasons for people who normally may not consider doing it, kind of thinking about, well, maybe I need to because of just the way their finances are right now. And they weren't planning on having to buy a home, but either the rental situation in their location is just crazy. So they're like, yeah, I'm going to buy because I'm not going to pay, 3 times what I'd pay in a mortgage for rent. So it does provide funds for a spouse who needs to purchase, but doesn't have the funds, ready cash available for that down payment and those closing costs. There are a number of programs out there, and usually, to all of them that I've checked out, and Kobe, you can speak to this in just a second, but home buyer education course, that's kind of an easy, they have it, it's online, you do it. A qualifying lender, which Kobe is, so that's why we're presenting it. But again, it's limited equity. It is a good option if this fits the situation. But there are parts and pieces to it. So it not a slam dunk, but if it fits your situation, it could prove beneficial to have it.
Yes. And then just so everybody knows, when you're going through a divorce situation, most lenders will treat both spouses afterwards as a first-time home buyer. Additionally, most down payment assistance programs nowadays, there are certain ones, but down payment assistance being for first-time home buyers. Whereas I had an individual in Indiana. He initially thought we were just going to be doing a cash out refinance, but then when the final decree came out, the house was awarded to the wife, and he had basically $2,500 to his name for anything. We were able to use the down payment assistance program where we were actually able to get part of his earnest money back. And I only think he put like $1,500 in earnest money. So it definitely is a great way if you are going through this situation to not be discouraged if you don't have the assets, especially in this current climate of many times being able to get seller concessions. And then pairing that with many 5% or 3.5% down payment assistance programs. One of the drawbacks is that you are going to typically see a slightly higher interest rate. However, being able to get into that home instead of having to go into a rental situation has been a powerful option that has worked in these situations. So I'll let you do the final statement.
So key takeaways from today's topic, we were looking at options that if you want and need maximum leverage up to the 90% cash value, that's the first option that we talked about. You can cash out refinance. If you're going to want to protect a really good initial mortgage rate for someone that's staying in a home, that HELOC may be an option that you want to look at because dang, you have just a really good interest rate and you don't want to mess that up. So, that could be what you need, or, a refinance, is the only way. Well, that quitclaim deed is how you get the person off title. So there's two pieces to this, the money piece and then the title piece. So having someone and working with a lender that is fully aware of both of those pieces. Most lenders are, but maybe they don't quite give it the importance it needs in these kinds of situations. So want to be sure that that is accounted for as you're going through. And then just bridging a gap for someone that finds themselves needing a housing solution that they didn't think they'd need. That's those down payment assistance programs. And then the timing of all of this That's mostly in any of these situations what we are really trying to get out to folks. If you're working with people in this situation, the timing of making sure whatever decisions you've got to do and whatever solutions you're coming up with are viable, having strategic timing of decisions and options is huge. So paths can be taken, but some of them are a little bit easier than others on these.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tammy, for all of that. I appreciate you guys listening. So we are going to open the floor up now to questions.
Thank you both. I have a question. If the spouse chooses a HELOC and, to basically buy out, their spouse for the home, what's the credit impact when they close that HELOC?
On which spouse?
Whoever's taking that HELOC out, that line of credit, like when they eventually close that HELOC, what type of credit impact is that to them,
So the
if any?
typical impact is that it looks like another mortgage on their, it's basically putting a second mortgage on that property. So in terms of, it's not like adding another credit card or changing any of those initial limits. All it would do is it would show an additional payment that they're responsible for, an additional mortgage. So if they were, that's the real impact. It's not really going to change the score dramatically. It's just going to show as an additional credit line that they are responsible for.
Right. And I understand what HELOCs are. I'm just trying to understand that, when they pay off, like they no longer want that HELOC open. They want to close it. Right.
So you always have the opportunity to close the HELOC at any time.
But is there any type of credit impact for closing the HELOC?
So I do not see any big impact for closing the HELOC. In terms of thinking about the age of accounts, it's going to be one of the newer accounts anyway. It's not like closing a super old credit card that has been there for a long time.
Paying off your
So
car.
yes, so it definitely. If you have any more specific questions, I can give you information to I have a credit specialist over at Mortgage Ready. That if
Okay.
you have any more specific questions about how that would possibly impact that, to my knowledge, that it's not a significant impact. However, I always defer to the experts that deal with that. I just try to make sure that the numbers look good when we're qualifying.
Fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Hey, Kobe,
Hey, Sammy.
I do have some specific questions that I'd like to speak with you off the call.
Okay.
Is that possible?
Yes.
Can I call you when we're done with this call?
Yes, you can. If anybody wants to, a lot of times I know a lot of us are in different parts of the country. If you want to, I'm going to drop my contact information in so that way, if you guys want to reach out to me later, and I know we've got some people in Colorado, some people in Illinois here, and I believe in other parts of the country as well. So I would be happy to continue to deepen those conversations so that way we can answer whatever we have. But does anybody have any other questions for the group? Okay. Well, I appreciate
Just
everybody joining. Go ahead, Tammy.
I was just going to say just one thing about any of the solutions or from any of our sessions that we've talked about and stuff. I just encourage you guys have a conversation with Kobe. Sooner is better than later. We're really trying to get in front of you, your clients, etc., especially in complicated situations. Sooner is better than later to have the conversation about what they look like, what their credit looks like, what their situation as a whole looks like. So not trying to make you guys the experts on the lending piece. That's what you want the contact for. But, the sooner that conversation can happen, the more likely a contract can reach fruition. So that just having the time to consider what is most appropriate for a circumstance is hugely beneficial.
Yeah,
So.
and and especially with your clients too, it's not always just when the divorce decree is being written. Like I think that there's probably three critical times that we look for. So number one, right before they're about to file, like what the agreements are with the different attorneys. And then once the decree actually happens, how do we satisfy it quickly? And then a lot of the timelines to actually have something happen are as long as 90 days. I did one with 2 years. So a lot of these transactions, it's not they get divorced to try to get it figured out right away. Staying in touch with your clients long term to just, and I know we did a poll the other day. I think a lot of people, when their clients are going through a divorce situation, they kind of know what the divorce decree says, but every once in a while, if you have someone going through a divorce, getting a little bit familiar with what your clients actually have to satisfy in there. It's not just he has to move out today or anything like that. A lot of times these contracts are very specifically worded with timelines that I definitely would. We did a whole presentation on talking about breaking down the decree, and I'd be super happy to share that with you if you guys want to email me for that.
I do have another question concerning your, well, for me, for my Facebook, if I do any advertising on divorces, do
Mm-hmm.
you guys have some kind of a script that I could post on my page about being your go-to agent for, do you have anything
Yeah,
like
I could definitely. Yeah,
promote
I
for
could
me?
talk with you offline
Okay,
about that. I think that there's definitely some ways to do that. I think one of the people that regularly attends here, and this is her niche as well, is Shay. Shay's been basically doing this for a while, and I think a lot of the things that she posts is actually on LinkedIn. And I'm not saying that anybody's specific strategy is wrong or right, but I think that there definitely is. Um, this isn't going up to title and holding a picture with your keys saying that this is a lot of this. I think that there's definitely some discretion that I would be really happy to talk about for how to specifically talk about this expertise.
okay, cool. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, well, I appreciate you guys finding me on a Friday. I hope that you all have a really busy weekend with lots of new buyers and sellers. And we're going to be back here again in 2 weeks. We're going to be doing a self-employed training
Some what
and
training?
self-employed. So we're going to be going over specific self-employed situations. And then if any of you are in the Denver area or even Colorado Springs or Fort Collins, I actually am going to be going deeper into this topic in 2 weeks. I'm going to be at True Title. So I'm going to be doing a live presentation there on next 2 Wednesdays from now. So instead of having to just see you on screen, I get to see you in person. So that kind of is exciting. So would love to see anybody there that would like to attend. And looking forward to continuing these conversations.
Can I call you then after the call on the phone?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Talk to everybody soon.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Scobie. Thanks, Tammy. Bye.